Let's go back to where we started, because it's such a complex issue. According to a survey by the Center for American Progress, 66% of Latinos live in areas that fail to meet federal clean air standards. The Republican House budget plan calls for stripping the EPA of its regulatory powers, claiming that the modernization of coal plants would trigger job losses and make energy more expensive. And yes, the new protections would raise the price of electricity, at least for now, adding a few dollars a month to your bill. But the EPA says the tougher and, yes, more expensive standards would also save lives. They would prevent 17,000 premature deaths, 11,000 heart attacks, 120,000 asthma attacks, and they would prevent 5.1 million restricted activity days due to air pollution, and 850,000 lost days of work due to illness. Wouldn't those benefits save more than lowering the standards? The economics, comparing the amounts of money, it's not something we do very well, is it?
No, because you are one of the very few media outlets that actually putting these numbers out. I mean, if you go to the mainstream media, you barely see these things. You had to, I don't know, become your own editor in order to find these very enlightening statistics. We've been talking a lot about skepticism and people not believing in the new economy, that all this is too expensive, we have to invest too much. Well, let's talk about, let's say, cell phones. Cell phones, the first time they were put out on the market was in 1985, and they were as big and heavy as a brick. And they would drop half of the calls, and it cost $4,000 a piece. Now, cell phone, we all have one of those things that do just about everything for you except for the breakfast, right? And also, in many instances, they're free. Why? Because they were a brilliant idea. And people love having a cell phone that gives you so much autonomy, right? Well, it was a brilliant idea. It's the same thing with so many brilliant ideas about the green economy. The thing is that we had to put money into it, and then we'll see the results.
But here's the difference. You could wait until the cell phone matured as a technology and decide when you were going to jump into the pool. You can't decide when you're going to start using electricity. Everybody pays an electric bill. And when that bill comes and it's $4 more or $3 more, and the reason why, and the utility company says in big letters on your bill, here's the reason why, because Congress forced us to do this. That's a different experience from you as the consumer choosing and saying, yes, now I will adopt this technology because it finally got cheap enough for me to decide to do this.
It took a number of years, of course. It took a process, and also it took a lot of technology that was invented by government funds. Let's keep in mind, 80% of the technology that is developed in the United States is funded by the government. So that's the thing. We keep talking about, conservatives in Congress are hunting for mice when the big game is all around them and they don't pay any attention to it. And that's the reason why we're having this debate about cutting $40 million in green jobs and not going after the $73 billion in subsidies to the big oil companies.
Right. But it's important to note that when we talk about cost, we've been through this play many times before. The big polluters, whoever's being asked to clean up, are going to say, oh no, it's going to cost jobs and it's going to cost billions and billions of dollars. And you know what? Time after time, they're proven wrong. For example, in the Clean Air Act of 1990 that reduces acid rain, ended up costing 1/4 of what the EPA predicted would cost and about 1/10 of what they said the industry would cost. Why? Once you've got standards and timetables, you get the spin doctors and the lobbyists out of it, and you turn over to the managers and the engineers, and that's when they can innovate. They can innovate and create new products and new jobs. So that's why cleanup costs almost never come anywhere near what was predicted. In fact, EPA did a study. For every $1 that we've spent on complying with clean air laws, it's provided $20 worth of economic benefits to this country, far greater than anyone predicted. So the cost is going to be lower.
But you don't enter this argument sort of on an even playing field. A lot of people spend a lot of money convincing consumers of the exact opposite of what you just said. It isn't even dollar for dollar. You guys don't have the kind of media firepower that the people who own energy companies have.
But the good news is those companies are basically wasting their money, who've spent $150 million last year to defeat clean air and clean energy legislation. Because by and large, poll after poll, whether done by the Washington Post or by the Sierra Club or whomever, found that generally speaking, anywhere between 60% to 2/3 of Americans support health protections from carbon dioxide pollution and other pollutants, even if it costs jobs or increased prices. And you can look at it, poll after poll after poll comes out with the same results, regardless of the economy. The American people get it. They understand that clean air and clean water is a right, and that if we invest in those things, it will help our economy grow and help us become more competitive. The people who don't want to do that are the Exxon Mobils of the world, who just made $11 billion this past quarter alone due to higher oil prices and not due to any great innovation on their own. Those are the people who are trying to gum up the political process to keep those things from happening.
Andrea, for decades, this has been portrayed as an upper middle class white people issue, that minorities are not environmentalists, that this is something that if you call a meeting on it, you're only going to get a small subset of the entire community. Has that turned? Has that changed? Has that profile changed so that if we go into San Antonio, if we go into the South Bronx, if we go into Los Angeles County, that it's no longer just a white upper middle class thing, it's an everybody thing?
That's a great point, Ray, because when we're talking about who is sustainable and who is environmentally friendly, we think of maybe the Caucasian couple with 2 incomes, no children, driving around, the hybrid, living in a house that may have solar panels or not. That brings us back to the conversation about incentives and what are we doing to make living a sustainable lifestyle affordable for Latinos. We need to be providing tax incentives so that they can afford the hybrid cars, the fuel-efficient cars, or the cars that run entirely on electricity and have 0 emissions. But for Latinos, this makes sense. And despite the fact that 1 in 4 families lives below the level of poverty, despite the fact that 1 in 3 of them lack access to health insurance, and despite the fact that they're among the most unemployed and the ones that have been the hardest hit by the economic recession, they're willing to pay more every month in energy prices to make sure that their energy consumption and that a larger share of it comes from renewable sources.
So if in the next election cycle, candidates appealing to the Latino electorate push environmentalism, that's a winning issue for them politically?
We have found that they are willing to call on their members of Congress and to vote in Senate elections, whether it's midterm elections or presidential elections, to favor a candidate that is most likely to promote policies that want to fight climate change, improve energy efficiency, and make sure that our environment can be clean and that our air is not poisoned and our water is safe for our children to drink.
Last year, Javier mentioned that there was a vote in California about whether or not to get rid of or suspend the clean air laws there. And Latino voters opposed it by a greater margin than Anglo voters or by African American voters. They were demographically the largest group in opposition, and this was a referendum that was put on the ballot by a couple of Texas oil companies in order to weaken the laws that they have to comply with. And Latino voters opposed it by, I think, about 66 to 33.
So the changing demographics and the new census numbers mean that the politics of environmentalism could change, and soon?
I think when Latinos see pieces of legislation like this thing that was passed by the House of Representatives about pesticides, they're going to remember. And they're going to, next year there's a general election. And at least the Sierra Club will do its very best to remind Latino voters who voted to increase the amount of pesticides in the environment and who voted for protecting our communities and our families. I think this is going to be a very interesting election as far as Latinos are concerned.
Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's edition of Destination Casablanca. Thanks for watching. And don't forget, you can keep the conversation going. Post your comments on our blog at www.hitn.tv/DCB. And once you're there, you can send your comments, questions, concerns, suggestions, and watch video highlights of the program. Join us next week on Cinco de Mayo, when we'll be discussing the impact of the new immigration laws and enforcement programs, featuring a one-on-one interview with Secretary of Homeland Security Janet Napolitano. Do you approve of the Obama administration's stance on immigration? Let us know at www.hitn.tv/DCB. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. From Washington, D.C., I'm Ray Suarez. Good night.